read a whole lot more than 5 because there's a whole bunch of you guys here. But so I get a little miffed if I have to read 10 pages. Somewhere in that ballpark, you'll be okay. So they settle down. And then I did a talking circle with them at the end and passed a rock around because I knew these kids were all graduating and they would not be seeing each other and they'd stay together closely. And so by having this experience of holding that rock and talking about what being in school had meant to them was really powerful for them. And so I was only teaching half of this graduating class. And so they came to me later and they said, we're wondering if we could have the rock because we want to go camping with the rest of our classmates and we want to engage them in a talking circle too. So then they were able to see some of the power of some of our ceremonies and ways of doing things and how it helps in healing and to bond people together in a good way. So I also tried to do some games with them. I played a truth or dare, kind of one of these foodie things, and so I had 4 people on each side, and I'd read out a question, and I said, if it comes your turn, you can tell what you think the answer is if you know it, but if you don't, you can make up a plausible, and then the other side has to guess whether it's the truth or not.
Oh, that's a good idea. I like that.
There was only one student who could make up an answer, and the other bunch of them were writing the answers.
Oh my goodness, that's funny.
Because they were so socialized in Western ways of thinking. And my sense is, in all of our Western ways of teaching, in preparing you to be practitioners, there's a structure that is alien to other cultures. And so when you put in someone like me, and I'm the only native faculty in our school, and I remember I took a group of kids out to the peninsula their first time, and I could just see panic and fear in their eyes. Most of them were blondes with blue eyes, and mainstream folks from European heritage. And it was like, okay, I can see that these kids they're going into Never Never Land into a reservation, and their teacher is native too. Oh my! And you could just see their fear. And I said, we've been taking students out there for many years, and one of the reasons I chose these tribes is because they're mixed blood people, and you won't know whether they're native or not unless they tell you. But it's important to assume everyone is unless they tell you differently. And it'll be okay because they're used to trying to help you and guide you on your way. And I'll be right there with you as well. So, yeah. Well, I think, anybody else have a question or a thought? Otherwise, I'll go ahead and share with you some of the things that I brought on this PowerPoint. And then we can stop along the way, and I'll storytell as we kind of go. And so let's see if I can now navigate this technology to get us going.
If somebody needs antibiotics, but they are reluctant to take them, or some type of medication that is Western medication, and they are not up to it, how can we?
I was going to say that's a really tough one, and most of our folks are not going to disclose that if they're going to traditional healers either. And I remember one time one of my friends gave me some herbs to take, but I made the mistake of not asking how much and what for. And so I thought that it was maybe for colds and stuff like that. And so I got this cold, and so I just brewed me up a big dark bunch of this and drank it for a week. And I was probably 5 to 7 years past menopause, and I started having a period.
Oh my
and
goodness.
The gynecologist about freaked out. And so they did all diagnostic tests to find out what's going on. They couldn't find anything. Finally, they said, is there any possibility that you might have taken anything that was traditional? And it was like, yeah, there is. And so, but I wouldn't have disclosed if they hadn't been so freaked out.
Right.
So it's important to know that most people won't disclose if there's some other treatments. And so I remember one time I made a home visit. I'm a community health nurse. I made this home visit. And so this child had a fever really high, draining ears, otitis. And so I said, you know, we really need to get this kid into a doctor and get him on antibiotics, and they didn't want to do that. But I also knew that they were very spiritual, and they wanted to go and have prayers and whatever. And so I said, you know what, let's do that then. You go and get them to the prayers tonight, and I'll be back tomorrow morning. God gives answers to prayers in many ways, and so we will see. And so when I came back, the child's fever was still very high, and they were still very sick. And so I said, and so will you trust me for us to try another way? And so she rode with me to town. And it was really interesting to the doctor. And it was just sweet because with her religion, wearing any kind of jewelry was not okay in the religion. And so I was only wearing my nursing pin. And so she said, well, I'd really like for you to come to my church and be a part of it. And then she hesitated for a minute. She says, but that jewelry that you wear, my nursing pin, you probably would have to take that off. And I thought, well, how precious, how sweet. And so part of it, this provider thing, is the provider-patient relationship and the trust. And to the extent that you can build a trusting relationship, honor where they may be coming from, be a little patient. I went on, I'll tell you, I promise you, I prayed because this kid temperature was about 104 or so. And I'm thinking, this is not a good situation. I'm going to be back out there by 8:30 tomorrow morning by the time they get up, and have the pediatrician ready to take us as soon as we get in. So it's not an easy kind of thing to do. So, and one of the things to remember is that you each carry your own special medicine and your own special gifts. I know sometimes people will go with me to our longhouse religion, to the longhouse, and they'll say, well, introduce me to the medicine people. And I'll say, well, we've got all kinds of folks, any one of us here. Depends on what you need. And recognizing that among all of us, and you're in a medicine work that you do. And so your ability to communicate, to connect, whoever your patients are, is a powerful medicine that you have to listen and to care and to understand and try to see kind of what's happening with them and how to work with them. And I know that sometimes can be really hard in Western medicine today, where you only have 10 or 15 minutes to see a patient and try to do that work. So we also have tried to do some things to influence systems and structures so that, if Grandma needs to come and tell her story, there's another level of practitioner who might have more time that Grandma can tell her story to, and then you can translate it to the fast-moving practitioners. So it's another possibility. So. Okay, well I know that didn't give you a quick, easy answer.
It was a good answer. I knew that it wasn't going to be a quick answer.
Yeah.
So let me see now. So I know that you guys are doing this for continuing ed. Aha.
There.
Okay, I got it. Okay, I think I'm good.
Yay.
So I know for continuing ed, you need your goals and objectives and all those kinds of things so that you can get your credit for C&E, or whatever you call your continuing ed. I'm calling it continuing nursing. So really the point of what I'm hoping we'll do tonight is to acquaint you with some of the health concerns for American Indian, Alaska Native people, and some of the healing practices that are commonly used among many Native groups. So and I'll also be dealing with cultural values. So at the end of the session, I'm hoping that you will have a sense of the 5 top causes of death for our Native people, gain an understanding of some of the different ways of looking at the world from a Native view as compared with the mainstream Western worldview, and the way that most people are socialized in our education systems in this country. And then share with you some of the beliefs about illnesses and causes of healing. One of the things I try to help people understand is that sometimes some of the language we use in talking about illness and situations that arise may seem really strange to you, but if you move past the confusion about the word will help you understand. For instance, along the coast, the term soul loss is sometimes used, and I'll share with you some about what that means as we move along here. And then also discuss and look at some native approaches to healing. So, okay. So it's important to recognize that we count now about 4.1, maybe a little bit more than that, million Native people in the U.S. That's based on census records. And so that's self-reporting. Some Native people recognize only the federally recognized enrolled Native people as Native. They're also state recognized. In most of our states, we have both federal and state. And so that number would be considered much smaller depending on how you chose to define Native. But if a person indicates on the census records that they have Native or Native heritage, then they're counted as Native people. And the median age for our people is around 28 years as compared to the median age of 35, so a young population. And the life expectancy for seniors has been changing. When I first worked, I worked a number of years with Fred Hutch Cancer Research Center and outreach across the Pacific Northwest. And in those early years, we really didn't deal much with cancer with Native people because the major cancers tend to show up with older people, and the people weren't living long enough, so the rates look much smaller. And I said, these data are not giving us the true picture, because when we begin to increase the life expectancy, the cancer rates are going to go up higher because they're living longer. And indeed, that is what happened. And so you see that there's this shift from 63.6 years up to 74.5. And I actually have some friends down around Umatilla who are now in their mid to late 80s. So we're doing a little bit better on that life expectancy. Washington State is, some people don't realize that the Pacific Northwest and Washington State has one of the highest Native populations in the country. If you put, of course Alaska really adds to that percentage, but if you consider Alaska plus Washington, Idaho, Montana, and Oregon, then that's the third largest Native population in the country. And Tacoma is the city that has the largest number of Native population listed in their census for the Northwest. So one of the things to think about when you're looking at the mortality data is that some of these situations are interrelated. We have very high rates of diabetes, which then contribute to heart disease and stroke. And so a person might not be listed as dying of diabetes, but it may be kidney failure, stroke, heart disease. Cancer now is really high because people are living older. The other thing that I've watched is the growing number of Native women under 40 who are not in line for mammogram for diagnostic identification have breast cancer. And so that's of concern to us too. Unintentional injuries, because water people out on the water fishing, logging, a lot of opportunities and situations for unintentional. In some of our communities where there isn't a whole lot to do on the weekend and you have two-lane roads in rural communities, a little bit of alcohol, a little bit of laughter, and put all those combinations together, and accidents, car accidents are a big cause of some of these unintentional injuries. So that gives us kind of a profile. If you look at children, the children, unintentional injuries is higher for them. Cancer and heart disease, some of those are more for the older. And then some of the mental health related drugs, alcohol, some of those kinds of issues become an issue in the middle age range of folks. So the alcohol and drug abuse, suicide, domestic violence related fetal alcohol syndrome are all a part of some of these issues. So it's important to recognize that cultures vary in terms of the way they think about health and wellness. And for Native people across the whole country, this harmony with nature and Earth as a living organism is a part of the way of thinking about yourself in relation to everything. So when I say OCO, my relations, I'm speaking to your beautiful trees here, to you people, and to the rocks and to the water, all our relations. So it's holistic in terms of mind, body, and spirit. Many of our professions, as you're going through school, are more in line with that view of the world as well. And I think there have been a lot of changes in how we're engaging in education and processing the kinds of work we do in Western medicine that's coming more into line. The relation to the rocks and the trees and some of those things, maybe not quite there yet, but we do recognize that if you've polluted the water and you've destroyed the trees, and now you have carbon dioxide emissions and so forth, that it's important to have environmental protection concerns. So now if you come to my house, I will sit and feed you native food and talk to you about these different ways of looking at the world and values. And it's important to recognize as I talk about this that we're not talking about all European people or all Native people, but it's just sort of a general kind of way. Native people come from reservations or come from communal environment, and even if you're put into the city, you still have a group spirit in your heart versus individual. And what that plays out in, for instance, when you go to school. I remember being in the 3rd grade and the teacher wanted to have stars to put on things that we accomplished, and I was not exactly the student who was really easy to deal with because I didn't want any stars and I wasn't wanting to compete with other people. And some of those things come out, you know, because when I went to nursing school, we had 100 students who started off and they said, look to your right and your left. Only one of you guys will get through. Competition. Only 8 of our 100 graduated that year. Or, you know, and it wasn't that year, it was several years later. Another is age versus youth. Mainstream culture, you know, you got to have that facelift and you got to dye your hair and really stay youthful looking, you know. And in our Native communities, there's great respect for elder and for seniors who carry the tribal wisdom and the wisdom of the people. Obviously, I'm very happy when I'm out in reservations. So another is cooperation versus competition. One of the things we're doing in our School of Nursing now is diminishing that competitive kind of way of doing things and encouraging our students to do group work, which is a big transition from individual work and the competition of individual work. It's a challenge because you have to deal with group process and teach people to work in groups. But that's sort of the nature of once you get out into the field and practice, you've got to be able to get along with people and to work in teams. So, and then I was talking about giving versus taking and saving. Some of the most respected and considered most powerful people in our community would probably be the person who has not anything very much because they've given it all away, and things don't matter so much as people matter. And so if someone admires something that you have on and it hasn't been given to you, then many times we just give it away because we know that it sings to their heart, maybe it would help them. So another is modesty versus self-attention. When I was coming up for these promotions in the university, one of the things you have to do is tell all these wonderful things you did, you know. And so my department chair was really helpful for me. He said, I know that that's not a culturally appropriate way for you. And so he offered to present my materials and gave me the option of not sitting in if I didn't want to. And so I went home and prayed while they all made their decision. He presented my stuff and it all turned out okay. And then another is listening versus talking. Now, I have to sort of qualify that because I went to visit the Mohawk people up in Quebec, Nurse Appreciation Day. And so they said, we don't really have any money under nurse appreciation stuff, so we're going to put it under the cultural stuff, so we're going to need for you to do some cultural things. And so anyway, so I did, but at the luncheon, they had a Mohawk medicine person do the opening prayer, and so he prayed for maybe an hour or hour and a half in the Mohawk language. And I have diabetes, so I'm now holding on to my, whatever I can, thinking any minute now I'm going to pass out with my blood sugar being too low. And then he apologized and did the prayer again in English. And I thought, my own people, the Senegal, those folks are all part of the, and it's not uncommon to see an elder talk for a very long time, and children sit and listen. Children who are only like 4 or 5 years old sit and listen way beyond 45 minutes to, so you learn to listen. When I was, it was after I was out of school, it was when I was working, and they had us all go to this conference to teach us how to listen. So they did this pretest, and so I scored almost 100% on the pretest. And after they did their thing, I made like 98.4 or something. And I thought, I did worse after I listened to this conference.
Oh my goodness, that's
But
funny.
you don't really realize that that's part of your socialization until you kind of experience some of these things. So what you will see is that folks are taught to listen for long times, but also great respect for elders who may speak for a long time as well. I remember one time I went to this conference over in Spokane, and there were a bunch of physicians. It was all about environmental protection. And one of the beautiful elders from Yakima, a really old guy, braids all the way down to his knees, got up and started speaking. And of course he was running out of time. And so somebody came to, can't we get him off? And I was like, not me, man. You'll need to wait till he gets through. So some of the perspectives on the cause of illness, lack of prevention, a price to be paid for something that you've done wrong, evil spirits, and we'll talk a little bit about that. I'll give you an example. Something that someone has put on you, disharmony with nature, and soul loss. So let me back up in some of these. Have you ever been riding along, happily on your way to work somewhere, and somebody behind you just toots their horn because they didn't like what you did?
Yeah.
That's putting an evil spirit on you. Think about how that feels and how long it takes for you to get that off of you to get on to work. And so it's not mystical, it's like we can hurt each other with words or with actions without even meaning to. And that feeling that something has been put on you. I remember one time I was in the mountains. I used to go down to Pendleton, the home of a couple of my beautiful mentors, and they would go up into the mountains, the Blue Mountains, and camp out for 3 or 4 days. And so Miss Tess, she was the CHR at that time, and so we got up one morning, and she has diabetes and high blood pressure, and so her eye was sort of streaked, and I said, oh, what happened to your eye? And she says, so-and-so put something on me. And so I said, and so what do you think you'll do about that? And so she says, well, I'm going to, because we had a whole array of medicine people working there and a medicine wheel. And so she says, well, I'm going to have the medicine people work on me and brush me and try to take care of it. And so my head was sort of processing in the Western as well as the native way of thinking. And I was thinking it's actually not really different, because what she was saying in a Western way was something upset me, something she did or said, and that raised my blood pressure, which then affected my eye. And so now I need to have help in relaxing and letting that go so that my blood pressure will go back down. And so if you understand and can interpret on both sides in both ways, our medicine people are very careful to, when they're working with people, to sort out that which belongs with Western medicine and that which belongs in the treatment of the medicine people help. And I've experienced in seeing that. One time when we were in the mountains, there was a young lady on a horse, and she fell off, and we were a long way from the emergency room. And so I was there, and then I had a nurse practitioner student with me. And so the nurse practitioner checked her over. We didn't move her, but it was kind of cold. And so finally she was able to stand up, and so we took her inside a teepee. And we both assessed that she was in shock, that she was very, very cold. And so they were calling the ER folks to get up to the mountains, and we just lay down together with the heat of our body and held her very carefully and closely till the emergency folks arrived. As it turned out, she was okay, just knocked a little breath out of her. But we could have lost her with shock. And it's important to recognize that attending, actually touching your patient and attending to them as individuals is a powerful way of trying to help people. So disharmony with nature, when we think about how we interface, for instance, I love plants and I like to grow things and enjoy the plants and what the plants can give to us. And if I'm staying away and don't get enough time to sit and talk to my plants, one of my aunties would say, sit and talk to your plants, they'll hear you. I told my little granddaughter, my oldest granddaughter, we were sitting in the backyard, that the trees could talk to us. She looked at me like, Grandma. She's about 6 then, so she's 15 now. But anyway, she said, Grandma, I don't hear any trees talking. And I said, you don't understand the language of the trees. Oh. And I said, listen very quietly. And then the wind started coming and you could hear the rustle of the trees. And she says, oh, I hear the trees now. And then, of course, Grandpa, who's sitting back there, he says, well, did you have her hug the tree too? So these are, but the point that we know actually from research in transcultural research is that what people view as the cause of the illness is directly related to what they will see as appropriate treatment. And so to the extent that you can help them relate whatever you see is going on and help them that and help them relate to the cause